Okay, let's get started. So in our first session, we defined what invasive alien species are. And to help you visualize how they function, I would like you to imagine a situation where you are hosting a party and you have invited your friends, but then you have some uninvited guests who have come over. They just get cashed the party and they're eating more and making the food not to be enough for the invited guests, invited people. So that's exactly what is happening in our in our ecosystems. The new visitors were invasive alien species. They're just getting all the nutrients, all the water, making them not to be enough for our native species. Yeah. For students, one of the things that you can imagine is you're writing your assignment, which is due in 1 hour, and then you go to the Wi-Fi, you join on the Wi-Fi, then boom, someone comes with their 5 devices. They're there also to use the same Wi-Fi that you're using. They're excited to download a movie that have just come out, and they're joined like they're downloading one episode on another device, the episode 2 on another one, until 5 devices. They're not attacking you, they're very quiet, not disturbing your peace, but then they're making the bandwidth of the Wi-Fi not to be strong enough, and it drops on your side and it's not working. You end up missing the deadline. That's exactly thing that is happening in our ecosystem. Invasive species aren't necessarily evil. They're simply faster and more aggressive when it comes to taking up nutrients, sunlight, and water. Yeah. So today we are moving from theory to reality. We are going to dive deep into specific case studies, looking at how this bandwidth hogging plays out in our own backyards, both in our waters and in our land. Now, let's see who are our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Kashi from Okavango Research Institute. He is a leading scientist whose 35 plus publications have literally written a rule book for Botswana's national policies on biofuels and plant ecology. Dr. Kashi, we are so happy to have you with us today. And the screen is all yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope and I believe I'm audible. As introduced, I'm Josepile Kashi from Okavango Research Institute of the University of Botswana. I'm going to give you a national overview of invasive alien plant species in Botswana. I understand, as the chair said, that you have been told what these are. He gave example of uninvited guests. So I can also add another jargon and say these are plant without borders. You can't stop them from entering. They can come by wind. They can go with birds. You can't stop bird and ask for a passport. So I can say these are plant without borders that enter our country and cause problems. So in the context of Botswana, these are plants which are not native to Botswana, but enter Botswana either intentionally or accidentally, upon which they spread rapidly and cause environmental, economic, and social harm. Recent studies have estimated the cost to be 423 billion, but other studies are showing that this estimate are just too low when it comes to estimating the cost of invasive alien plants. And these costs are largely associated with the damage to the ecosystem, damage to the infrastructure, agricultural loss, including costs associated with management of invasive species. As I said, they come from other countries and enter Botswana in the context of Botswana. Therefore, they can come from different regions. They can come from North America, South America, they can come from Australia, they can come from Asia. So in the other slides, I'll show you other possible ways through which this plant can come from different countries and cause problems in Botswana. So examples here, we have prosopis. As you know, it's a problem all over Africa, East and Southern Africa, but it's originally from North Mexico or So this plant is a serious problem, and I'm happy that one of the speakers is going to talk about prosopis. I would also like to highlight that we have Parthenium hysterophorus. Those who are from East Africa and even South Africa, this is a problem with. It's newly introduced to Botswana, so it needs close monitoring so that it doesn't have the same problem that we are facing with prosopis. So it's still at the introductory phase, so it needs rapid eradication so that it doesn't spread to other adjacent ecosystems. Like I said, these are exotic plants. Once they invade an ecosystem, it can be your savanna, it can be your farming area. They start to take over the land and dominate because of their rapid growth and high seed production. So as we can see, this can enter your savanna ecosystem and take over. Then it means the palatable grass, which are used by forage, by herbivores, will not be there. The invasive species will dominate. Like I said, they can also enter your agro ecosystem and invade your cereals. They can invade your maize, your sorghum, and then compete with these edible crops for nutrients, water, and sunlight. So they can really cause a serious reduction in crop yield, other than just the environmental impact. So example of those plants, we have Acanthospermum hispidum. Like we said, it can take over an area. So this is a visual example of how invasive Acanthospermum hispidum can be. So as we can see, it has invaded an area. You can't see anything other than Acanthospermum hispidum. Like the chair said, they grow rapidly to take over the land. As we can see, the biodiversity has already been reduced, as it is the only species that is growing here. Even in aquatic ecosystems, we have Salvinia molesta. As we can see, it has covered the water surface. You can't see the water there. Imagine the fish that is living in this aquatic environment. Oxygen diffusion is affected. Light penetration is affected. So there is no life below this dense mat of Salvinia molesta. Remember, these invasive alien plants are not, their impact sometimes is forgotten, that other than their impact on the environment, they are also a threat to public and animal health. As you can see, some of them, they can cause allergic reactions. Some are poisonous to animals and humans. The Ferox, those who know the stories, we know there are kids or there are boys in high schools that can dissolve the seeds of Datura ferox in water. Then after a couple of hours or after a day, or if they keep them dissolved overnight, to them it's like a spirit, is a wine. So although it's harmful, it makes them drunk because of the toxin that is inside. It makes them to hallucinate. So as we can see, the impact is not only on the environment, or it's not only ecological. It can be an impact on animal health. It can be an impact on human health. Now, what are the traits that makes this plant so successful upon arrival in a new area? The obvious one is the fact that this plant are easily spread from one area to another by wind. Therefore, it will be very difficult to put a barrier at the border to say, I'm going to stop invasive plant from entering. Water, especially aquatic plants. Animals, some of these plants, they have spiny inflorescence, or the inflorescence has bears that can help them attach to the animals or anything that move. They grow rapidly and have high seed production. Because they grow rapidly, they grow taller than the native species, and therefore shade out them or reduce light for the native species. They compete for nutrients and water. The most important one, though, is lack of natural enemies. You'll understand, you'll agree with me that even in animal biology, for instance, the hyenas and the lions are able to live in a way that I can say is a balanced population, because the hyenas will feed on the calves of the lions or the puppies, then the lions will do the same, so they will be balanced. Now, if this exotic plant or the alien plant arrives in Botswana, it means it has left its natural enemies, including diseases that can retard its growth and make it balance with other species in its origin. This is the reason why in biological control, if you are looking for biocontrol, you go to where that species originate and then get that enemy and use it to reduce the population of that alien plant. So lack of natural enemies is, to me, is the major one that ensures that the invasive alien plants grow rapidly to outcompete the native species. So how do they move from one area to another? Like I said, they go through wind, but there are other pathways for which us as human beings, who are largely responsible. Horticulture and ornamental trade. We trade a lot in invasive plants, and we are responsible for importing them as we use them in gardens, landscaping, and ornamental purposes. Agriculture and forestry. In Africa, we have ministries or government departments that imported invasive trees either for timber or for biofuel, and this species escaped that purpose and became invasive. So we are responsible for intentionally introducing this invasive plant. They can be also as a contaminant or by mistake in transportation or global shipping. People also move, they also move unintentionally. They carry invasive species. They can attach to your shoes, they can attach to your clothes. So therefore, the pathways are largely us either accidentally or unintentionally. We introduce these invasive alien plants. So that's why in this table, I'm showing how the different pathways contribute to this plant. So a lot of jacaranda that we see around is because we're interested in that purplish color that you see during winter. That's how it was imported as an ornamental tree. The Department of Forestry is going to present. They will agree with me that we intentionally imported Prosopis species to stabilize sand dunes in Kalahari district, but unfortunately it has escaped that purpose. Is now causing problems in adjacent ecosystems. The Ministry of Agriculture, we promoted Lucina as a forage tree, but is now causing problems. Ailanthus excelsa, which is called tree of heaven, but in northern Botswana, especially in Mau, we call it prison tree. Wherever you go, there is no a street, whether it's a tarred road, whether it's just a traditional road. This species is in every street in Botswana. I mean, in Mau. From Mau to Shakawe, Gudikwa, this tree is everywhere. Because unfortunately, we promoted it as government, as the Department of Forestry, as a tree that grows very fast to provide shade. Majority of them can come as contaminants of seeds that we use to grow our crop. As you know, most of the varieties that we see in large commercial areas in Patamatenga, they import their seeds from Australia. So it's possible that that seeds may contain some seeds of species in Australia that can be accidentally transported to Botswana. Trichodesma zeylanicum is one example where in 1 year, farmers started seeing this new plant. So one of the possibilities was probably because we use seeds from different countries, it came with seeds. But I would like to highlight the fact that we are sharing borders with countries such as South Africa. If you look at the bottom, the last row there, the reason why it is in red is because it's possible that there might be natural spread from neighboring countries, given that South Africa has about 379 invasive alien plants, and we share a long border with South Africa. So it's possible that some of the species that you see are intentionally spreading from South Africa into Botswana. So this I was just showing here the pathways through which the invasive species can enter Botswana. Remember, I talked about Ailanthus excelsa, prison tree, or internationally called tree of heaven. They call it prison tree here because most of the cuttings in Mau, they were getting them from Department of Prisons. So that's why they call it prison tree. Even in terms of the invasiveness, you can see it spreading next to the prison buildings, moving towards other residential areas. So as you can see, I'm just showing you, you see it's along the roadsides. Somebody has just dropped gravel soil there and it's there, it came with that soil. So as you can see, it's really invasive in Mau. Like I said, there is no a street without invasive Ailanthus. Other species, Prosopis, maybe it's Happy Hill is going to talk about Prosopis. Cenchrus biflorus, we have farmers that have stopped growing crops or planting crops because their fields have been invaded by this spining Cenchrus grass. You know, it attaches to your clothes. It's not easy to remove it. Once it injures you, it stays underneath your skin. It's very difficult to remove it. So some farmers have just abandoned their field because of this spiny invasive grass. Lucina, like I said, we imported it as a forage leguminous crop, but it's now everywhere, but it's still within residential areas because livestock, and other animals browse on it. So at least that keeps it in check. But within the residential areas, it's a nuisance because it can actually grow itself as a hedge along your fence. But this is an example of an invasive plant that was intentionally introduced to serve a purpose, but it has since escaped that purpose to invade other ecosystems. This is the wild sunflower. This one is everywhere, underneath the trees mostly, probably implying that it is likely to be spread by birds because most of it is under trees. So showing you that as the birds rest on the tree, their droppings contain the seeds of this invasive plant. Then we have the most devastating one, Acanthospermum hispidum. The one I said is everywhere. I was doing a studies for Chobo Holdings, doing a survey for their camps, all the camps, including national parks and game reserve in Botswana. There is no place without this tree, without this invasive plant. It reminds me of an American I met. He just looked at the plant, say, you guys, we have this plant. They say you're in trouble. Now I understand why he said that. If you don't monitor Parthenia hysterophorus that I showed earlier, it's going to have the same impact that we are seeing here. So that one needs close monitoring. So Amaranthus hybridus, we have many of them. The good thing about these ones is that they are part of our diet. They are indigenous We have indigenous species that we eat as vegetables. Even this one, we eat as vegetable. The unfortunate thing is that because it's a contaminant, mostly in soils. So if you use coral manure, all farmers that use coral manure as an organic fertilizer always have this problem. So it can be a serious problem. The good thing is that it's edible. Xanthium stromarium, this one, it likes seasonal floodplains. Wherever you see seasonal flood, we see it is mostly along the riverbank, along the seasonal floodplains. So it's also a serious weed, but it's only that is confined along the seasonal floodplains or any habitat that is subject to flooding. Bacteria ferox, this one I believe we know it, is the one I said is very toxic. Boys in high schools, like I said, they can smoke it, they can dissolve the seeds in water overnight, they drink it, it makes them drunk. So it's poisonous, this one. So that's why the recommendation is that you always put on gloves when you are weeding it. Even the smell, the smell is very strong, I think it's a sign that is really poisonous. This is Parthenium. Like I said, Parthenium is one of those species that I said is recently introduced in Botswana. It has not yet invaded farmers' field or the environment. Therefore, it needs close monitoring. Now, as Botswana, should we be worried about invasive plant? Yes, I've shown you example of invasive plants that are present in Botswana. I've highlighted that they can spread from neighboring countries, especially South Africa, where we share such a long border with them. We import seals from South Africa and other neighboring countries. When it comes to tourism, we are one of those countries which attract a lot of tourists. And tourism has been identified as one pathways that introduce invasive alien plant. Yes, as a country, we need to be worried about invasive plant given this risk and the stress. In addition to that, we also have obligation as a country because we signed the Convention on Biological Diversity where we were supposed to report on invasive alien species. This was the strategic plan for 2011-2020. So I believe at the end of 2020, we reported the status of invasive plants in Botswana. So we have that obligation as a country. Even in the latest one that replaced the 2010, we have the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, where the target 6 expect member countries to reduce their invasive plant by 50%. So you see, as a country, we have that obligation, given the threat, given that we have joined the international community in playing a role in reducing the impact of invasive alien species. Given that, so what are we doing as a country at the moment? As a country, the attempt by the different departments to manage invasive alien plants. For instance, the Department of Water Affairs is specifically responsible for managing aquatic invasive plants. In fact, it's the only department that has a law that specifically addresses aquatic invasive alien plants. This law is called Aquatic Weed Control Act, and it's meant to regulate the movement and importation of boats and aquatic apparatus. This means that you cannot import this boat or aquatic apparatus without permission. Ideally, you are also not allowed to move with this apparatus from one area to another, still within Botswana, without permission. At least within the Department of Water Affairs, we can see that they are responsible for aquatic invasive plant. So there is an effort there to control them. Similarly, the Department of Forest and Resources, they have been working on prosopis. They've engaged the communities, as you will see, as you'll hear from the next speaker. They've been trying their best to work with the community to manage and control prosopis species. As for the invasive grass, the Department of Agriculture Research, now called NADI, has been developing herbicides to try to control this grass. So you can see there are attempts by government to control these invasive plants, although it may not be enough, but to me, that's something we can build on those attempts by forestry, by water affairs, by National Agricultural Research Institute to try to manage these invasive plants. Now, if you look at our national laws as a component of management of invasive plant, these laws are actually two. If we include environmental impact assessment, we can say three, but they are not sufficient. As we can see, CAP 3502, plant disease and pest. As you can see, nothing about invasive plant. They just say plant disease and pest, so nothing about invasive plant. What does this tell you? It tells you that this law on its own is not sufficient to control invasive plant. It talks about the fact that you must list, or at least the plants that may or may not be introduced with or without permit. It talks about plants, not invasive plants. But of course, there are a few invasive plants that are there, but it has combined plant diseases, it has combined it with pests. It lists invasive plant as plants. As we can see, it's not recognizing them as invasive. So we run the risk of, allowing plants which are invasive to be traded or to be cultivated. Similarly, the noxious weeds in itself still talks about plants or weeds, but it doesn't talk about invasive plants. Even the list of invasive that is there is not yet revised. This is still the old list that was developed in 1966 when we gained independence. Therefore, the nomenclature of these weeds has changed. We have new invasive plants. Even the fine or the penalty for cultivating these noxious weeds is still stated at 5 rands. So as you can see, we are still using the South African currency. This tells us that our national laws are not sufficient to limit the distribution or to limit the introduction of invasive plant. Environmental impact assessment, it doesn't say anything about invasive plants. Of course, it mentions weeds. So as you can see, this is not sufficient. We can learn from countries such as South Africa, where, for instance, they are very clear. They have categorized the invasive species based on the weight of the risk. For instance, they will say category 1, this plant is not allowed or is strictly prohibited. So if you go to category 2, they are saying you are allowed, but within a restricted area. So we need a law that deals specifically with invasive plant. It reminds me of a friend who said, you can even look at the laws of Botswana. There is no the word invasive. I agree, because this talks about plants, it talks about weeds, no mention of invasive plants. So I was just highlighting that the attempt to manage invasive plants, but we don't have sufficient laws to actually limit the introduction or stop any cultivation of this invasive plant. We still charge 5 rands. So a 1966 law needs to be revised. So having said that, like the chair said, we are going to look at the terrestrial and the aquatic one. At this juncture, I would like to now move specifically to the aquatic invasive alien plants. So which you'll agree with me, similar to the terrestrial invasive plant, they also negatively affect aquatic systems as well as human use of these natural resources. Once they are there, as I've shown you, a dense mat of Salvinia molesta, they hinder commercial and recreational fishing, they block drainage pipes, they decrease the aesthetic value of our aquatic or of our water, and therefore they have that negative impact on our aquatic ecosystems. Compared to the terrestrial ones, how are they introduced? They can be introduced as fishing bait, they can be transported on recreational boats and equipment, they can escape aquaculture, they can be stocked intentionally as food or recreational sources. But the main one, you will agree with me that because we receive waters from Angola through either the river basin, the Okavango River Basin, which forms the delta, or the Kwando Lenyanti systems, that the water can also carry some aquatic weeds through the border into Botswana. Therefore, in Botswana, we have 5 species that needs close monitoring. The first 3 were once reported in Botswana. That's water hyacinth, Kariba weed, and water lettuce. Kariba weed is the major threat. As for water lettuce, it was eradicated in 2005. Water hyacinth was once reported in Limpopo. So these 2 are the minor threats. But as for Salvinia, especially from last year, September, we had a serious infestation. So these 5 weeds, we are not allowed to collect specimens. The first thing you do when you see it, you report it to the Department of Water Affairs. So the main one, when it comes to the aquatic, which is the Salvinia molesta, like I said, Pistia stratuates was eradicated in 2005. Not that it's completely out. You may find that this year there might be some cases of water lettuce. Water hyacinth was mostly in the Limpopo area, where the collaboration between Botswana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique led to its eradication or control. So the main one, which I'm going to focus on, which is a threat, which is an ongoing threat on annual basis, is Salvinia molesta. Now, this 3 you might have seen them somewhere. Water hyacinth, that's how it looks. Salvinia molesta, that one, I think we we know it. If you once visited Okavango Delta, you must have seen it. The water lettuce, I'm sure it's also a problem in South Africa. Like I said, it was eradicated in 2005, but it doesn't mean it's not there. It might be there, but a few populations that are there, the early monitoring system can handpick it before it becomes a serious problem. Now let's focus on the management of Salvinia molesta. You can just physically remove the hand. You can hand remove the dense mat of Salvinia on water surface, where casual laborers are normally engaged, especially to remove small infestations. The ecosystem approach, where you try to ensure that the areas that are free of Salvinia molesta are not invaded by Salvinia molesta, using early warning system, where you see a few plants, you remove them. The chemical control of Salvinia was tried way before it invaded the Okavango Delta. This was in 1972 to 1976, where the Salvinia first invaded the Kwando Lenyanti system. That's where these 2 herbicides were used. They were stopped in 1997 because these 2 herbicides are non-selective. So they kill all the plants that are there. They were not selecting Salvinia from other plants. So they are non-selective. They will kill all the plants which are there. So then the use of these herbicides was stopped, and then biological control was introduced, where Cytobaga salviniae was used after learning its success from Australia. So it was introduced in Botswana in 1986 and is currently managed and coordinated by Department of Water Affairs. So the only one that is working for now is biological control, although the physical control is used to remove small infestation. And at the same time, when you remove the small infestation, the weevil is also harvested and sent back to the river to control the salvinia. So the hand weeding comes handy in that way, that when you remove the mat, you also harvest the weevils and then reseed other areas that have low population of the weevil. Now this is how it works. The adult lays the eggs on the salvinia, and then it hatches within 10 days into larvae. This larvae is the most destructive stage of the weevil, because it actually bores the rhizome and the stem, making the salvinia to collapse and die. So while the adult feed on the leaves and buds, the larva is the most destructive one, and it's the long-lasting stage, because this one lasts for about 21 to 25 days. So within that 3 weeks is hammering the salvinia as it bores through the rhizomes and the stem, and then the salvinia collapse. So it's the most destructive part of the life cycle. Now, like I said, the adult chew the buds and the young leaves, while the larvae, which is the most destructive part, burrow the inside of the rhizomes, and the mat sinks due to the internal destruction of the tissues. So it's the most destructive phase of the biological control. Now, I sometimes get this question when I make the presentation, to say, after eating all the Salvinia molesta, where does the weevil go? Like in predator-prey relationship, once the weevil is released, it feeds on the Salvinia, and then it reduces the population of Salvinia. At the same time, when there is no more Salvinia left, the population of the weevil will also reduce. Will reduce significantly until the Salvinia regrow again. Then the weevil will multiply and feed on Salvinia. So it doesn't crush completely. It will live on other dead remains of Salvinia in small populations. But once it warms up, it starts to lay eggs and multiplies again, and the cycle restart. So that's why it's able to, that's why it doesn't become extinct. Like we observed with, if you read in the literature, the biological control for water lettuce became extinct in 1987, when the weevil had nothing to eat. But in the case of Salvinia molesta, the few that are remaining, or the decomposed one, this weevil can still survive on those microhabitat of the Salvinia, and then wait. When it warms up, the Salvinia multiplies again. The weevil also lay eggs and multiply. The question that I normally get again is, how does it lay eggs? On average, it lays eggs 4 to 5 eggs, or 3 to 5 eggs per day. And therefore, because its life cycle lasts for 60 days. So if you multiply that 5 by 60, you'll say on its lifetime, it can lay 300 eggs. So it's a very successful biological control. I've seen it working. I will show the pictures in the next slides on how it works. Like I said, as you can see, this was observed, say in August, is shown there, 19th August, when the biological control was introduced. You can see within 2 to 3 months, there was nothing there. As we can see in picture B, that it has completely removed the salvinia. So if you see it at first instance, when the weevil start working, start controlling the salvinia, you'll think it's not working, but come back after a month or so, you will see that this is working. So like I said, it's working, but for some people, they expect this. If you see the weevil, then within 2 days, there should be nothing. No, it takes a bit of time for this to work, but it does work, as you can see in that picture, that salvinia can biologically control. I mean, the weevil can biologically control this aquatic invasive plants. So I was just showing this picture so that you appreciate the biological control of Salvinia molesta. So what do we recommend given the situation of invasive plants in Botswana? We need to strengthen our legislation and regulation. As I've shown you, the Plant and Disease Act and the Noxious Weed Act are not sufficient to regulate cultivation of invasive plants. In their nomenclature or in their language, there is no the word invasive in there. Even the list of plants which are listed as noxious weed, that's an old list. Therefore, we need reforms in the legislature that is used to regulate importation of plants. We also need to develop a national inventory and database of invasive alien plant. This is important for effective management of invasive alien plant. We don't have that database. It's just a few localized studies. One will do one in South, another one will do one in Northeast, but we need to have that national database. We can learn from other countries like Australia and South Africa that you need to classify this invasive plant based on their risk and impact, so that when there is a need to import the plant for research, that is assessed and weighed accordingly to make a decision on whether a permit should be issued. The fourth one, we need to develop a national invasive species strategy and action plan. I know the NBSAP, what we call NBSAP in different countries is there, but we need to operationalize it, have activities that are geared towards acting on invasive plants. We need to strengthen early detection and rapid response system. We shouldn't wait until the invasive plants become a serious problem. So this early detection and rapid response system is working, especially in the control of Salvinia molesta, because when you see a few populations and they are reported, they're easily, physically removed from the water system. If there are weevils there, we literally harvest them and feed other areas that have the weevil. So we also need to implement integrated control measures. We have to try all the methods, combine, physical, with biological control, and we must be very sensitive to the environment. That's why I'm not a fan of chemical control, because they do harm other organisms. So I'm not a fan of herbicide or chemical control. I also recommend that we need to enhance our institutional coordination and capacity. We need to establish a national coordinating body on invasive species. There must be that collaboration between Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Agriculture, institution of high learning. We must also invest in training, funding, technical capacity to monitor and control and manage this invasive species. The most important one, this is public awareness and stakeholder engagement. Stakeholders are not aware of what you mean when you say invasive plant. We need that public awareness, especially that we see this roadside marketing of ornamental plants. So we need to make them aware of invasive plant. For this, I would like to congratulate the Department of Forestry and Range Resources, especially that I work closely with in Mau. They are trying their best to make the nurseries, those who run nurseries, aware of the invasive plant. There are instances where the department or where the mining companies here in Mau wants to rehabilitate their areas. The Department of Forestry is involved there to link them with this nursery owners, but they always emphasize that they should sell native invasive species, not the exotic species. So they're teaching them, making them aware of this invasive species. Lastly, this invasive plant, they don't have borders. They are plant without borders. Therefore, we need regional cooperations between the SADC countries. Let's share data on the distribution. Let's share data on technologies and on biological control agent. If one biological control agent is working in Namibia and South Africa, we should be able to share it. So regional cooperation is important because some of these invasive plants are transboundary. Therefore, it's important to have regional cooperation. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Kashi. I should say this was a really, like, it had a lot of knowledge in it. And I've learned a lot. Looking at the pictures of invasive species that you have shared, it's very interesting to see some that I know from Malawi that we are native for Malawi being invasive in Botswana. And that's very interesting. But I'm just curious to know on the weevil that you shared, doesn't it have any impact for other native plants?
Yes, it's very host. Oh, sorry, it's very host specific. It feeds only, fortunately, by God's grace, it feeds only on Salvinia and nothing else. So the process of biocontrol is a very rigorous process, in view of the biosafety issues. So it goes through rigorous testing under controlled environment to see whether it can feed on native species. So unless we have confirmed that it's very host specific to the invasive species that you want to control, the laws are very strict that then it should not be released. So fortunately for this one, it's very host specific. They actually traced the natural enemy back to southeastern Brazil, where this Salvinia originate. That's where they located the natural enemy for Salvinia and then introduced it. It's very host specific, fortunately.
Benedicta, can you please unmute and ask your question?
Thank you, Dr. Gyotsapile, for the presentation. I'm just curious. I'm from the South African side of the border. I want to know from you, does South Africa and Botswana have a bilateral platform where they share this aspect of control and management of alien invasive species? Subsequent to that, because we have biological control agents that we release along the border sides from your Schelpatz Heg. South Africa has got various border posts along Zeerust, but those number of border sides. So we release biocontrol Hypogeococcus pungens on Hypogeococcus pungens on Cereus jamakaru, queen of the night. It's a cacti plant that grows tall. And then we do release cochineal on stricta, Opuntia stricta. So we just want to know as whether will we not be, for some reason, triggering your environmental law on the Botswana side, because unfortunately with cochineal, it's airborne. Once you release it this side, it will control this side, and because the cacti also occurs in Botswana, it will migrate and target the species as well in Botswana. Will that not result in a legal aspect? And to add on your presentation, I've heard you saying in South Africa, the alien invasive species are listed under NEMA 10, Act 10 of 2004. It's not only NEMA, it's two legislations that have a shared mandate in dealing with alien invasive species. The other one is Conservation of Agricultural Resource Act 43 of 1983. And lastly, I just want to find out, how did the aquatic biota, in terms of your animal biota, respond to the use of glyphosate on control of Salvinia molesta? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Benedicta, and thank you for highlighting those possible biological control agents for sharing. Yes, I think, like I said, the only area where I think we are seeing active role by Botswana is the Aquatic Weed Control Act. Like I said, when the water hyacinth invaded the Limpopo River Basin, all these four countries collaborated to manage and control it. Now, as for the terrestrial ones, because of lack of specific efforts and strategies to specifically work on this invasive plant, there is a limited collaboration between these two countries. That's why I highlighted that, working with South Africa, this regional cooperation can help us learn from other countries. So I think one of the reasons is because we have not yet came to that and realizing that invasive plants are real problems. Unfortunately, with the invasive plant, these politicians, unless they see the impact, they tend to doubt what you are talking about. But I'm happy that some of these platforms are shedding light on the impact of this invasive plant. Already the impusha that you are mentioning, you must be having it here. So that collaboration, we must start it. Unfortunately, for the terrestrial ones, we don't have that platform, but for bilateral, for the invasive one, because there is department that specifically deals with aquatic plant, I think that's why they are very successful in that area. But I recall that there was one workshop where we invited Namibians, South Africans. That was way back in 2013, where we looked at strategies to manage prosopis. So I think the Department of Forestry, because they are next in their presentation, if they have any platform, I think they will assist me in highlighting it if I've missed that part. Thank you again for that highlight on Conservation of Agricultural Resources Act. So Benedict, I'll request that you share that information with me either in the message section, because you said a lot from which I can learn and take it forward. Otherwise, thank you for your questions and comments.
See, we have another hand from Neria. Neria, would you please unmute and ask your question?
Hi, Dr. Cash. Thank you so much for your awesome informative presentation. I would like to ask you, how does aquatic invasive plants alter water quality and availability for human use? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Yes, on the water quality, I don't recall any study that looked at the water quality, but I don't recall any, toxins or any poisonous solutions be emitted by this plant. But I don't recall any study on that, but I don't think they affect the water quality. one thing I know is that if you see them growing high, not growing very fast and things like that, know that there might be issues of eutrophication where there might be nitrates or phosphate within that water system that's enhancing the growth of the Sylvania. But as for them contaminating water, I haven't come across any study that looked at that. And I doubt that they might be having that impact. I missed, in addition, I forgot to answer Benedicta on the impact of the two herbicides that were used to control Sylvania in the Kwando-Lenyati system. Yeah, like I said, these herbicides are non-selective, so I will assume they will kill everything that is there. Any plant that was there, to me, it will be killed by these two herbicides. I've used them. I've seen them being used in the no-till system to control weeds. They kill everything that is there. So they will kill everything, even edible plants. I think that's why they were stopped in 1977, because of that collateral impact on other species.
Kim is asking, are there indigenous species that like to feed on the weevils? The weevils that you're using for biological control, are there any other indigenous species that feed on it?
No, we haven't observed anything. There were rumors that some bears are eating it. I think they were just condemning the method, the local communities. But monitoring showed that there is nothing that is feeding on this weevil, at least during the day. That one we are sure. We haven't observed on anything that is eating the weevil. And because the bears that they were saying, they were just two bears, too big to eat the weevil. It's just a small weevil that, unless if that bird will also eat the Sylvania. So we haven't observed anything that is feeding on the weevil.
Thank you so much. And there is another question from Nina Wambiji. It says, are there alternatives for the chemical control since paraquat and glyphosate was discontinued? So are there any other alternatives?
No, the only alternative is the biological control. Now we have to make it work. How do we make it successful? You can make it successful through early detection and rapid response, whereby a small infestation that you see should be removed within 2 days or so, because Sylvania grows very fast. It can double its size within a week. Therefore, if you don't act within a week, it means the surface area that you see invaded by Sylvania will double in a week. So early detection and early response can help. Like I said, the few species that you see, normally the Department of Water Affairs, they engage casual laborers to remove the weed, and then within that weed, they also harvest the weevil and seed other areas. They just leave this Sylvania outside to dry and die. So early warning system works perfectly well if combined with the biological control. The problem is when you delay this until now, it has covered the whole area. Like I said, it can multiply, double its size in 7 days.
You can go for it, Benedicta.
Yes. Okay, thank you. It's not a question. It was just to add on what Dr. Kasha just said about early detection, because I've heard him saying Parthenium is still a new weed in Botswana. And I just want to flag it to him to say it's becoming a very problematic weed in South Africa. So they rather go through the route of the early detection to control it as and where they find it in Botswana, rather than saying it's not yet a problem. As much as it's now becoming quite a big problem in South Africa, it's gonna soon catch Botswana as well.
Yes, thank you for that. I think I highlighted that it needs to be tackled as soon as possible.